Hello, lovely people. I'm Debs. Welcome back to my channel, Raina Read Stuff. I'm here in the book shack. It's a lovely sunny afternoon. This means that half of my neighbours are either drilling or using a circular saw. So I'm hoping that the microphone is going to get rid of most of that, but please forgive me if it doesn't, because I need to do this video now. It's nearly the end of March, which means it's nearly the end of the first quarter of Historathon, and that means the second quarter is rapidly approaching. For those of you who don't know, Historathon is a year-long event where we read non-fiction history. It was set up and is still run by Vin at Revenant Reads. I am absolutely delighted to be a co-host. I am going to put all the rest of the co-hosts down below. We split the year into quarters. So we are just coming to the end of the first quarter, which is prehistory to 500 CE. The second quarter is quite a big one, and it's 500 CE to 1500 CE. So we've got 1,000 years to play with here. And other than that, there aren't any rules. Read non-fiction history of any type from that period. Now, I make a habit of buying, when I see them, books in second-hand shops and bargains on BookBub and things like that, in preparation for each of these quarters. I appear to have gone slightly over the top for the second quarter of Historathon, and I thought, do I pick and choose what I want to read? But I can't decide at the moment what I want to read. I'm just going to show you them all. I'm going to start with the ones that are sitting here next to me. Because they're in the way. And then I am going to move on to the ones on my e-reader. Bear with me, this could take a little while. I'm going to fly through them as quickly as possible. So these are in no particular order other than the order they are either stacked in here or the order I screenshotted them on my iPad. So let's go. Leo de Hartog's Genghis Khan, Conqueror of the World. Mid-13th century. Looks like fun to me. Now this one is probably one that will be on my TBR rather than the pile of possibilities, mainly because everybody I've read it said it's really good. And this is Juliet Barker's Agincourt, The King, the Campaign, the Battle. Apparently this is a superb telling of the story of the Battle of Agincourt. So that's quite high on the list, as is, you might recognise some of these from last year's list, you know, but I did quite a lot of Viking stuff last year, so missed out some stuff. This was certainly on the list. Revelations of Divine Love. This is by Julian of Norwich, who is an anchorite. She was holed up in a church in a room that she couldn't get out of. People passed her food. And this is what she wrote when she was in there. She was alive between 1343 and 1416. Now, this is more general. This is by Geoffrey Hindley, and this is the brief history of the Anglo-Saxons, the beginnings of the English nation. So this takes us from the end of the Roman era up to the Norman conquest in 1066. Alfred the Great by David Horspool. I know the story of Alfred the Great, but I don't think I have ever read a history of Alfred the Great. So that's on the list. Now, this one is definitely being read because it also ties in with a number of other things. It ties in with People April, and it ties in with Spring into Adventure. So this is the book of Marjorie Kemp, believed to be the first biography written in English by a woman. And I say written, I believe she dictated it because she wasn't that literate. 1373 to 1440, Marjorie Kemp lived. She had a huge number of children, a husband that she must have got on with at some point because she had a huge number of children, but she went through periods of not getting on with him, and she ran several businesses to a lesser and greater success. Because of all her family turmoils, she took herself off on very long pilgrimages. This is the story of those journeys. Moving quickly on. Eric the Red and Other Icelandic Sagas. I have several saga books. It's also Sagalong during April. For Sagalong, for which I'm also a co-host, we will be reading the Vinland Sagas, which is the sagas of Greenlanders and the sagas of Eric the Red. So there's Eric the Red. Although this book looks quite a reasonable size, the sagas that we're reading for Sagalong this year are really very short, so you shouldn't have too many problems with them if you wish to join in. This one interests me, and this is one that crosses time periods. 50 Eastern Thinkers. This is by Deanne Collinson, Catherine Plant, and Robert Wilkinson. And this analyses 50 major thinkers from the East, Zoroastrianism, Islamic philosophy, Indian philosophy, Tibetan philosophy, Chinese philosophy, Korean philosophy, and Japanese philosophy. It takes you all the way up to the 20th century and begins in the prehistory era, but the majority of people in here are from the second quarter. Early medieval Europe, 300 to 1000 CE. This is by Roger Collins. And it says it's a detailed account of the centuries which Europe changed from being an abstract geographical expression into a new, culturally coherent, if politically divided entity. So the problem is these all look quite interesting, otherwise I wouldn't have bought them. I got midway through this at some point. Arbella, England's Lost Queen. Arbella was the grandchild of Bess of Hardwick and a niece to Mary Queen of Scots. And there was a belief at one point that when Elizabeth I died, she would hand the crown over to Arbella, but she didn't. Now, this is another one that I really want to read, and I really wanted to read it last year and didn't. Maybe we'll have more success this year. The Scourging Angel, and this is by Benedict Cummer. The Black Death in the British Isles. This takes us all the way up to 1350. And obviously it's about death and pestilence. But I do Don't count how many times I say I really want to read this, will you? Because I'll just be embarrassed. Another one about an individual king. This is a book about Edward the Confessor. It's by Peter Rex. And Edward the Confessor was the son of King Ethelred. It's not that long, this one. I mean, if you take off all the notes and everything, it just about goes over 200 pages. Then we have yet another one, King John, England, the Magna Carta, and the Making of a Tyrant. This is by Stephen Church. I have an interest in this one because one of my ancestors was one of the lords that signed the Magna Carta. William Mowbray was his name. My maiden name was Mowbray. So we'll see if we manage to get round to that one. Then I have this, and I'm told this is actually quite a long and turgid read, but I still sort of want to read it. Vanished Kingdoms by Norman Davies. The History of Half-Forgotten Europe. And this one again crosses several time periods, but the majority of them, the earliest one is the Visigoths, 418 to 507. So that just sneaks into this time period. And then we go all the way up to the USSR disappearing. But most of these are in the time period we're talking about for the second quarter. You read that? It says Life in the Middle Ages. It's by Martin Whittock, and it is a social history of England between the 10th and the 15th centuries. So that fits in nicely. This one's slightly more general. Again, it crosses several time periods for Historathon. This is The Gates of Europe. It's the history of the Ukraine. It's by Sir Plochy, and apparently it's a compelling and outstanding short history. And when we say short, we're talking about 350 pages. I read a Janina Ramirez book for last year's Q2. This I was going to read. I think I only read the first chapter. I'm going to need to start again. The Private Lives of the Saints by Janina Ramirez, who is predominantly, she's an art historian, but she's also a television presenter. And then I have, this is by Thomas Cahill, and this is Mysteries of the Middle Ages. This is, I think this is another one that was on the list for last year. Although this looks like a real chunker, it's only actually 300 pages long, and the text is reasonably large, so that might be doable. We've got 3 months for this. We've got until the end of June, so I'm sure I can fit several of these in. Now, if you think that's a lot of choice, just you wait to see what I've got next. Right. Sagas of the Icelanders. It goes back to Sagalong, includes the Vinland Saga. Then I've got a couple of fun ones. Well, this one looks fun. Weird Medieval Guys. This is by Olivia M. Swarthout. How to live, laugh, love, and die in dark times, it says. So that looks like a fun one. Professor Alice Roberts is up next. This is also about the Middle Ages, and this one is called Crypt. And this says life, death, and disease in the Middle Ages and beyond. I've read several Professor Roberts books, and I also love her television programs. This is, I think, possibly the only one that I haven't read yet. Crossing several time periods again, an African history of Africa by Zainab Badawi, from the dawn of humanity to independence. I know very little about African history, and so that's a possibility. Now, this one has a really nice cover, but when I go to look on the thumbnail, when I go to look at it, it looks like this. Christopher Hibbert, The Rise and Fall of the House of Medici. Again, more time periods, but you've got to start it at some point, haven't you? Online Penguin Classics I've found. So this is, you see that? That's the Chronicles of the First Crusade. This is edited and introduced by Christopher Tyerman. And I'm presuming it does what it says on the tin. And then we have another Penguin Classics. This is the translated Magna Carta. If I read this, I ought to read the King John book. This is translated with a new commentary by David Carpenter. I also have the Delphi Classics version of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and the Delphi Classics version of the complete works of Geoffrey of Monmouth. I have several Alison Weir books. They're not all together in my photos. So this one is Mary Queen of Scots and the Murder of Lord Darnley, it says. Oh, this one looks interesting. Although gruesome. It's by William Andrews and it's called Medieval Punishments. And this is a history of torture, illustrated no less. I'm hoping it's just drawings like this because I don't want any blood and gore. This says it's the funniest history book since 1066 and all that. It's unruly. It's a history of English kings and queens, and it is by David Mitchell, who is a comedian and actor, and I think he is very funny. And then more Anglo-Saxons. We have the Anglo-Saxons, A History of the Beginning of England, and this is by Mark Morris. Moving away from the UK, Science in Medieval Islam, an illustrated introduction by Howard R. Turner. I'm trying to whip through these because we're in 20 minutes already and I haven't finished yet. Another Alison Weir book, Elizabeth of York, the first Tudor queen. So she ended up marrying Henry VII. We have another Michael Wood book, and this one is 40th Anniversary Edition, expanded and updated, and it's In Search of the Dark Ages, a history of the Origins of Britain. And yet another one, there goes the saw, circular saw. Sorry. Move this up here. This is another Michael Wood book, A Portrait of a Civilization and Its People. Okay, I think they've stopped. And this is the story of China. Obviously, again, it will cover several time zones. Sorry, I had to pause you. That was quite a lot of sawing. I think it stopped. Right, where are we? This is The Autumn of the Middle Ages. It's by Johann Huizinga, translated by Rodney Patton and Ulrich Mamitz. I don't know what language it's translated from. I'm sort of guessing it might be Dutch, but it might not be. Then we have, by L.P. Harvey, Islamic Spain, 1250 to 1500. Perfect for the time period. Royal Witches by Gemma Holman. Now, this is a study of 4 women, from Joan of Navarre to Elizabeth Woodville. And then we have Women in the Middle Ages. This is by Frances Guise and Joseph Guise, who also wrote, apparently, Life in a Medieval Castle. And this is the lives of real women in a vibrant age of translation. So this transition. So this has taken documents and evidence of real women and is producing this here. A History of Venice. Multiple time periods again, but should fit quite nicely into here. This is by John Julian Norwich. Another Alison Weir, Elizabeth the Queen, Life of Elizabeth I, and then the 6 Wives of Henry VIII. A book by Philippa Langley, The Princes in the Tower. I have a great interest in the Princes of the Tower, and have done ever since I was a kid. Another King John book, but this is King John and Henry III, and England's Lost Civil War, and it's by John Paul Davis. This is meant to be really good. The Time Traveller's Guide to Medieval England, and it looks like it's quite a fun one as well. This is by Ian Mortimer. Then John McHugo has written A Concise History of the Sunnis and Shiites. I know nothing of the differences between those two and feel I ought to learn. Another one by Ian Mortimer with the Time Travel Guides is Medieval Horizons, Why the Middle Ages Matter. And then we have another Alison Weir book, Henry VIII, King and Court. We have The Lost World of Byzantium by Jonathan Harris. And The Real White Queen and Her Rivals, The Women of the Cousins' War. And this is by Philip Gregory, David Baldwin, and Michael Jones. Finally, we've reached the end. The Tudor Tutor by Barb Alexander, Your Cheeky Guide to the Dynasty, it says. So I've got some quite serious ones. I've got some quite fun ones. Again, there's an awful lot that are Brit-centric, but I do have others as well. That Vanished Kingdoms, even though I have heard it's quite a slog. That does cover most of Europe. I'm really interested in reading the book about the history of the Ukraine and the Genghis Khan one. I don't really want to concentrate solely on British history. That's more than 50 books in total. With the best will in the world, I'm probably going to read about 10. If you have any recommendations for any of those, please let me know where to start. And let me know what you're reading if you're taking part in Historathon as well. Thank you very much for watching. I'm sorry about the interruptions. Hopefully they weren't too hideous. I shall be back with what I'm planning in April and other bits and pieces this week. So I hope to see you then. In the meantime, enjoy your week and I will speak to you very soon. Bye-bye for now.